So let's move on to constructing a pitch. This is something you are going to have to do for this class, so it's a good thing to pay attention to. So here are some questions to ask yourself, and I will go into these in detail. So what is my hook? What is the player's identity or sort of fantasy in the game? Who are they? And what's the world like? What's the most exciting thing the player can do? Or what's one very exciting thing the player can do? Or funny thing or cool thing? And am I using simple language? And I must admit, I am sometimes at fault for not using the simplest language I can, but it's something that we can all work on. Okay, so a hook is some interesting bit of information about the game that compels people to try it or to discuss it. That was from Ryan Clark in this Game of Sutra article about like making pitches or making actually it's about how to design a game for having good hooks. So for you, this would be related to your core mechanic and your pillars. You want to choose the main gameplay mechanic, or occasionally, sometimes you might get away with choosing the main aesthetic that makes your game stand out. What's like one really cool thing that makes it different or makes it extremely fun to your target audience? You can sometimes express this as a combination of other genres or games. So I put an example. It's basically Hitman, except you're a goose, to describe Untitled Goose Game. But this can be kind of risky. If your listener doesn't know what you're comparing to or thinks the things you're comparing to are bad, then you've lost them. So that can be like a nice shorthand if you already know that the player probably has an interest in these other things, but make sure that you have some kind of backup that gets back to like your main gameplay mechanic, what makes it cool, or what makes it stand out. So in terms of fantasy and identity, you're wanting to sort of situate your listener as the main character in the game or as the player, right? You want to pretend like they're already the player. How would you be unbiased when choosing a hook? Well, I mean, think about what you think is the coolest thing, but you can also ask people, right? Like, get people to play your demo and ask them to tell you back. What do you think the hook was? What was the most fun thing you did? I mean, that's a pretty simple question. People will usually have an answer for you. If you hear the same answer over and over again, that's probably the thing. And you may find that it's not something that you considered your core mechanic, and in that case, maybe it should be your core mechanic. Like, maybe at that point, your design should alter. That's part of the reason why you get people to play your prototypes at all. All right, so back to fantasy and identity. So this would be related to your theme, your story, characters, aesthetic, the stuff that's kind of around your game that makes it worth playing, that gives you like some emotional investment. Don't give lore. Like, don't do exposition. If people have not bought in enough yet, you probably, the person you're talking to has like never heard of you or your game. They don't care about the story, and you will bore them. But do tell the player who or what they will be playing as and what the stakes are, so why they should care about your world in one sentence. So people want to be able to immediately imagine themselves in a really awesome scenario. They want the fantasy. They want to know like what they're getting hyped about, right? In one sentence only. So what we used for Quench, which I'm going to read again later, was you play as Shepherd, an avatar of nature, to help Shaman convince the other animals to join her on a dangerous pilgrimage. Or you could say to help an elephant convince the other animals to join her on a dangerous pilgrimage, if you want to be like, less specific, less lore-based. So we're saying right away, you're an avatar of nature. You control the weather. You're helping and guiding animals. That's like the basis of it, right? So you can kind of do this you can try doing this for other games that are interesting to you, or some other games in your genre, and then try to apply it to your own game. So for Breath of the Wild, you might say like, you play as a hero who's been, I'm doing this off the top of my head. You play as the hero of Hyrule who has awoken after 100 years to find that the world that he knew is gone. Like, that's a lot of sort of mystique to like bring you in. You're like, whoa, I'm a hero, but I've been like away for a long time, and it's like kind of going to be apocalyptic or lonely, or try to bring in the like emotions part of it. Okay, so the third part is exciting actions. This will be related to your mechanics, most likely. So think of the absolute coolest, funniest, or most stylish thing that you're able to do in your game. It doesn't have to be your main mechanic, but what's like one thing that's like one example of something really cool that you could do? Put that in a single sentence. So if I'm using Breath of the Wild again, you can parry a laser and then cut all the legs off the robot in order to kill it or disable it. So you can, again, do this exercise for your favorite game, a game in your genre, and then your game. And see what you come up with. Right now, maybe you don't know what the exciting actions are, but maybe you probably at this point have some ideas about what they might be. It's not wrong for your pitch to include something that you haven't yet created, as long as you plan to do it. So just try to bring them in with that try to get them as excited as you are about what you imagine the game to be, right? And use simple language. And in particular, don't use video game language because the people that you're talking to might have no idea what you're talking about. If they're not familiar with the terminology of your genre or of video games in general, they're going to glaze over. So avoid words like roguelike, crafting, proc gen, or procedurally generated, or strategy. It's not wrong. Actually, I'll show you this real quick because it's kind of funny. So this is a slide from the talk that I linked at the beginning of the lecture. It's by Adam and Rebecca Saltzman. And it says that good pitches lie between what is boring trash and lies. So don't tell lies. Don't make up things that aren't true about your game. And don't say boring trash. Don't give them the lore and all the backstory and all the things that they would want to discover in the game once they've already committed to playing it. Just give them a little bit of both. A little bit of fantasy. Just enough to get them hooked, right? Anyway, simple language. Back to that. Yeah, cherry picking. Exactly. So pretend your listener knows nothing about your genre. Use plain language to tell them the really exciting parts of your game. Tell them how the game will make them feel. People love feeling feelings, especially fun ones, right? So for example, instead of saying it's a strategy game, you could say you'll have to make tough decisions that affect your troops. Sell them the fantasy. Instead of crafting, you can talk about how they'll be making weapons and armor to protect themselves from monsters. That's using plain language, where it's really describing exactly what they're doing. It's not using a shorthand that is like a game term. Gamers will understand what you mean, but not everybody will. And it's more fun. You can really get more into the fantasy if you can imagine making weapons and armor to protect yourself, as opposed to there's crafting. Great, everything has crafting. All right. Yes. So here's our good pitches are a combination of not quite lies and not quite boring trash. So then you're going to be putting all this together in 3 sentences. First sentence, give them the main hook. Second sentence, sell them the fantasy. Third sentence, describe one cool action. That's it. 3 sentences. That's all the time you have. The reason it's called an elevator pitch is because you only have the time that the elevator is going between a couple of floors to explain your thing to a potential person who's going to give you money. So you really only have 10 seconds to sell that. Peter Molyneux enters the room. I see. So this elevator pitch, you are going to be making one of these and you're going to be including it in your pitch document. And then, if you move forward with this game and you decide to make it in the future, you're going to be giving your pitch every time you demo the game, every time you have a meeting, every time someone asks you, what are you working on, which is going to be 40 times a day at a conference. And you're going to have to get really good at saying it, memorizing it. And like I said, you're probably going to iterate on it. So you're probably going to find the parts that are awkward or boring or too long or whatever, and you'll condense them down. And you have to remain excited about saying your pitch. Even though you will have heard it 1,000 times, every person that you tell it to is going to be hearing it for the first time. Yeah, get ready to sell yourselves. So for example, for Quench, mine got a lot shorter over the years. So I started with a pitch with those 3 sentences, and it eventually shortened down to the sentence, Quench is a story-based puzzle game where you play as an avatar of nature to guide and protect herds of animals. If you go, I wrote this off the top of my head, but if you go and look at like the Quench game Twitter feed, like description for what Quench is, it probably says exactly this. Plus available on Steam and Switch, right? So the sentence I say, this is what I say to people when they ask me what I'm making or showing. It's that one sentence. I've said it literally thousands of times because we were working on our game for 5 years. In my written pitch deck, it became longer a little bit. But I'm trying to sell the fantasy more in the case of a pitch deck. So I have some elements of the story and the action that get the viewer interested in our game. And it says, become shepherd, an avatar of nature, and guide herds of animals on their difficult journey. Help Shaman, the young elephant leader, convince the other animal tribes to join her. Protect the herds as they're beset by flood, fire, drought, and the dark smoke beasts that have spread across the land. So you get a sense of like, you know, there's going to be a journey, and there's animals, and you're protecting them, and there's danger, and like all that stuff hopefully sounds really cool. And notice that we don't, in these sentences, necessarily, I do in my short one, usually, just to get it across, but in my pitch deck, I don't like overtly state the genre. I don't really compare it to other games. I don't use game terminology. I just describe what you're doing in like fantastical terms. So we use verbs like protect, guide, help, right? Because that's what we're doing. Like it's a very like caregiving puzzle-y game. And then finally, listen to others. So other people are really great at explaining your game back to you in their own terms. You might give your pitch and someone will kind of glaze over, and then they'll play it and then they'll be like, oh, what they would used to say is, oh, it's kind of like Lemmings, or oh, it's like Black and White, but it has a story. And like, we listen to those things, and then we steal those phrases and we tell them to other people for your own pitches and your own demos. So other people, especially strangers, are really good at summarizing these things at times.